Good afternoon. I have 12 o'clock. I think it is time that we get started in respect for everybody that's joining us. My name is Sandy Ratliff. I'm with Virginia Community Capital. If you're not familiar with us, we are a community development financial institution offering lending, investing, and community innovation services. It has been my pleasure to be a part of this program since, it's hard to believe, 2014, in partnership with the Washington County Chamber of Commerce, the Virginia Highlands Small Business Incubator, and the town of Abington. And I think this is probably one of the longest running professional development programs in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And it started as a support project for the Washington County Business Challenge that we're all a partner of in this team. Just some housekeeping things before I turn it over to our co-host today. This session is being recorded for education and training purposes. We will also have this available on the Virginia Highlands Small Business Incubator's Facebook page and also on our YouTube channel, New Knowledge, where you will find probably 130 plus professional development workshops that have been going on since 2015, the when we started recording them. So thanks, Sarah, for leading the session today. And now I'm going to turn it over to my partner in crime, Kathy Lowe with the Virginia Highlands Small Business Incubator. Kathy?
So it's my pleasure to introduce Sarah. I've known Sarah for quite some time. She was the events coordinator for the town of Abington, and she did work that full-time job and owned a small business on the side. She's always worked at least more than one job. Sarah says that she's had 4 small businesses, and she's been designing websites since 2008. She said she's not really a tech geek, but she is a problem solver, and I do believe that. The name of her company is Green Spring Collaborative, and she and Mark Luwagi, who is a graphic designer, solve problems for small businesses as far as their marketing needs. She collaborates with freelance photographers, videographers, and artists for her clients as they are needed. Her mission is to solve the online problems for independent businesses in Southwest Virginia, and I think she has a proven track record of doing that. So without further ado, Sara Saavedra.
Thank you, Kathy. It's funny when people ask me how I went from event coordinating to website building. I have to remind them that I've been doing it all along. There's always been a part of my job that involved building websites. So let me get our presentation started here. Great. And so today we're talking about using online tools to market your business. And, that is a really big subject. And so I'm going to encourage folks that before even we get into this, to be prepared to be a little overwhelmed. Many of the things that we're going to go over could really be full-time jobs, each one of these things, and they are full-time jobs for folks. And so the most important thing to remember is to just chew off one bit at a time. When you're a small business owner, you end up having to become an expert in a lot of things. And if it's not something you want to become an expert in, I always tell folks that's why it's good to hire other people. And so just like you would accounting or taxes or something like that, sometimes these tasks can be overwhelming. And so take it one step at a time. Some things you'll be really good at and some things you'll not be so good at, and that's okay.
Sarah, one thing I wanted to ask, would you prefer people to put in the Q&A questions as they think about them, or do you want to handle all the questions at the end? We can do it either way. We just want to, if folks that are joining us live, if they have questions for you, that we respect that and get those asked.
Sure. I would love it if we've got kind of 4 sections here. So we're starting with strategy and brand voice. Then we move on to DIY website mistakes, and then we move on to search engine optimization, and then content. So after each one of those sections, I will pause, and then it would probably be best to take questions based on each one of those sections.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So I am a strategy person. Kathy mentioned I call myself a problem solver. And so I cannot work on any project without first starting with brand, without starting with strategy. Who are you? Why are you in business? What problems are you solving for your customers? What answers are you giving them to their questions? So no matter what, whenever you want to start with online tools, you could post on social media all day, but if you don't have a clear vision and a clear voice, you're not going to connect with customers. And so it's sort of a waste of time until you really connect with your brand voice. So I talk about a lot, if your logo didn't appear with your content, could your audience identify the content as coming from your brand? So if you think of just in your own life, the commercials you see come on TV, the things that you see out, on a billboard, those things are often very quickly identifiable as a certain brand. It comes to mind things like Target. I always know a Target commercial before they even ever show the Target logo, because you kind of, their colors, the feel, the things they're saying, the feelings it invokes. Those are what we call brand voice, right? Old Navy is a good one. Progressive commercials. You think of those things; you can identify immediately who that brand is, and because they have a strong brand voice. So I have an example here of Walmart, and you can see here that they're using the Walmart blue, the Walmart yellow. You've got images here that are things that are easily identifiable as coming from Walmart, right? It's a brand we're really familiar with. Here's another case study we've got with a very different brand, right? You've got Ben & Jerry's, who is known for their wacky flavors, but they also have a very strong social justice kind of flavor to their brand voice. So you can see here that they use this font. It's the font that you recognize from any of their branding materials, but they're using it in a way to talk about the prison industrial complex, right? So a brand voice can be varied. It can be really intense. It can be really authentic. It can be really silly and playful and all of those things, but it's really important to find out what your brand voice is. So I always like to start with my clients with a question: if your brand was a person, how would you describe their personality? So for Ben & Jerry's here, you've got quirky, it's colorful, it's a mishmash of all sorts of things. And they do that and show that in visual language, right? You've got sort of like collage elements. You've got lots of bright things. You've got great flavors. You have really people are happy when they have ice cream in their hand, right? So those are kinds of the brand personality you think of. So we're going to talk a little bit and we'll just touch on it. And again, these are things that you'll need to sit down and take some time to do for your own brand voice. But how do you find your own brand voice? Well, spend some time getting to know your positioning, where you stand, by asking yourself some questions. We like to make a list of adjectives that describe the characteristics of your brand. Is it passionate? Is it authentic? Is it quirky? Is it healthy? Is it trustworthy? I mean, it really all depends on, where you're positioning yourself. And positioning comes into play, especially when you think about your competitors. We all have them, right? No matter what business you're in, even if you're the only one doing exactly what you're doing, there's someone else maybe adjacent to solving some of those problems for your clients. So sometimes it's easier, instead of starting from scratch with your own personalities, to think about your competitor's personality. How would you describe that? How is yours different? What are you offering that's new? And it might not just be a product. Don't get stuck in products. Think also about customer service, about offerings, about maybe you go beyond and above. Maybe you don't have the same restrictions. Maybe you serve a certain sort of clientele versus a different kind of clientele. And if you do, then how do you reach those people? So based on those characteristics, just take each one and kind of describe your brand using that adjective. And then also we like to list do's and don'ts for that. So let's go to this next slide for a good example of that. So when I talked about positioning, I talked about sometimes it's easier to know what you're not, right? To define what you are. So I like to look at these examples like we are this, but we're not this. So a good example, we're authoritative, but not too serious, right? We're funny, but we're not sarcastic or rude. We're friendly, but we're not like super sappy, right? So you can have those. It kind of just sets the boundaries and the spectrum there. Like you're adjective, but we don't take it too far, or we're adjective this, but we make sure not to, be like this. So use those. And here is a great chart. And I encourage you to do this with your brand and constantly do it. You don't, no business is a once and done. As you get to know your customers and your clients, you add things, you take things away. And so this will change. And so be open to changing your branding and your positioning, tweaking it a little bit here and there as you need to. So let's take a brand here that says they're passionate. Maybe the description of this adjectives is we're passionate about getting more people outdoors. So their brand voice do's and don'ts. They want to use strong verbs and nouns like champion, be the cheerleader for the outdoors, right? You want to make sure that everything you say is passionate about what you're selling or what you're offering, what service you're offering. Brand voice don'ts. Don't be wishy-washy, lukewarm. Don't use a passive voice because if you're passionate, you're not like, wishy-washy about things. So that's a good version of the brand voice don'ts. Authentic. We're down to earth and part of our community. Will help you find what you need, even if it's not with us, right? That's an authentic person who helps. We all have someone like a business like that in our life that we really appreciate. So that's part of this example's brand voice. The voice do's, be honest and direct, stick to your word, show the human side of your brand, show the people who run the business, not just the things you sell. Show, the folks who are out doing things, show that authenticity that you actually do what you are passionate about. Brand voice don'ts would be don't use jargon, don't overpromise, and don't use gimmicks. People can smell a gimmick from a mile away. So if you're authentic, that's not your brand voice. Friendly. So the description would be we sell to people who share our passion for the outdoors. No question is stupid. We'll help everyone, right? So within this example here with this outdoor business, you think there are a lot of people who have no idea how hard a certain hike might be or what kind of shoes they need to wear. And even though that seems like something most people would know, it's not. And so that friendly aspect, it brings into that description. Brand voice do's, be happy when people get outdoors, share encouraging stories, comment on their posts with friendly comments. Don't ignore questions or comments. Don't be negative about other brands or customers. So that's a really good exercise to go through, taking your brand, your business, finding your characteristics, describing them, and then from there, taking that description and making some brand voice do's and don'ts. This is especially helpful if you have multiple people working on, say, your social media or your marketing, if you have more than one person, or if you're handing that off to another person, because this gives them a really good framework of what to go, what kind of content to produce. So that's the end of that first section. I'll go back here. Do we have any questions? Okay, let's move on. Now, this is one that I know a lot of folks, there's a lot we could add to this list, but I'll just start with the top 5. So when businesses are starting out, a lot of folks will go to DIY websites. You're talking about Wix or Squarespace or Shopify, or there's a million of them out there, or even trying to do it yourself on WordPress. And the biggest thing to remember is that any one builder is not necessarily better than the other. I will say you could do a lot with most of them, and they are really great for businesses starting out who don't have the budget to hire someone who's a little bit more knowledgeable about that. So that's why I like to go over these top 5 DIY website mistakes, because when you're starting out and you just need to get something up online, it's better to kind of have a good framework to know where to start with. Especially because your website really is the first impression a potential customer has of your business, right? Like people are online, especially now, especially in light of COVID, and they just like customers look at reviews first, they also look at websites. And if you don't have a website, that's our top one mistake, and you're only relying on a Facebook page or an Instagram page or whatever it may be, an Etsy site, if you're an artist selling things like that, that's a big mistake, because as you want to grow your business, where a Facebook page might have been great to just really get you off the ground, not having a website does affect your credibility. So take it serious, make it count. Another thing to consider with that is that you don't own the content on Facebook. You don't own the content on Instagram. You don't own it on Etsy. I mean, it's up there, but these platforms can take away your rights to post at any time, as you know, some folks see. So having your own website that you own and that you manage and that you control the content of is really important. So do not rely on just Facebook or Instagram. Did we have a question? Okay. I'm going to rely on.
Yes, you do.
Okay, great. I'm going to rely on you guys.
What are the easiest web services for non-tech staff to maintain?
It really depends on the level of non-tech staff, right? I've dealt with clients who didn't understand, I had to explain with them what drag and drop means, right? And that's a pretty, you would think pretty standard. So I would say if you have non-tech staff, to find someone who can assist you with building a website or assist you with training on it. Of course, YouTube is full of training. And so no matter what, you should have some training involved with that. But, you know, I like Wix is pretty user-friendly. I feel like it's pretty intuitive. And after I've trained clients on it, on their Wix website, they're able to take it over and kind of maintain the edits for the most part. But they already have that structure built in, you know? So I would make sure that if you're doing a DIY and you have staff, you know, because a lot of folks start out DIY when it's just them and, you know, maybe their partner. I would say that definitely start out on Wix or Squarespace. And there are ways that you can buy templates and things like that that make it a little easier for you. So yeah, and like I said, YouTube and Google are your best friends if you run into issues or you can't sort something out there. Okay, so the one thing I do see a ton, and you can see I kind of try to put up an example of it, and this was really tough for me to do because it's against my nature, but you'll see it all the time that you've got hard to read text. So it is really important. A lot of folks to know, right? We know that visual websites catching the attention of folks is really important. So we use a lot of imagery, and that's great. And a lot of times people will put text on top of it. However, if you can't read the text that's on top of a photo, it's of no use to you, and it's very frustrating user experience. And in that case, that means folks are going to bounce off your website. They may never get to your value proposition or what you're offering them. And it will really affect your search engine optimization, right? Because when people find your website, if they leave it very quickly, Google recognizes that and will stop sending people to you if they don't find your website valuable. So text over images can work, right? But it needs to be an image that has a good solid background, maybe, or maybe the text is too small. That's why you can't read it, or it's too thin and needs to be bolded. You need to really organize your information in an easy to read format. So not just over pictures, but you think of websites where the text is very small, or maybe it's too big and it's hard to get to all of it. Just kind of looking there at how readable your website is. The next mistake I see a lot is unclear proposition. We get into trying to build our website, trying to get it up, and we need to do it, and we're on a deadline. and we find a cool design, right? And we just try to plug in some stuff there. Well, that's not strategic, right? So we come back to the brand voice. We come back to looking at what we're trying to say, what we are offering, what problems we're solving. And that needs to be the first thing on your website. So it goes a little something like this. First, you grab their attention. You grab it with great visuals, you grab it with a tagline, you grab it with a value proposition, something. And then we lead to awareness. So once you've got your potential customers' attention, you want to lead them down to awareness of what you're doing. Imagine this like a funnel, right? And so then you give a short description. Now, if you're a complicated business, say you're therapy services and you offer tons of therapy and it's very complicated because you have patients of all types, all ages, you don't want to go into all of the nitty-gritty details. You want to make sure that you're just kind of giving an overview so that once you bring that awareness to your potential client, that leads them into wanting to find out more, which is what we call the discovery phase. And then from discovery, then once they find out, oh, well, I saw that they offer physical therapy. Oh, they offer physical therapy in home. Then it's intent. Then it's that call to action button that gets them to make a phone call or gets them to fill out a contact form, or, if it's a e-commerce site, gets them to buy the product that you have funneled them down into. So it's really important to make sure your brand voice is evident immediately when you're building your website, that the problem you're trying to solve is pretty immediately clear, and then that you lead the customer into a journey that solves that problem. The fourth mistake we see a lot is no mobile design. So a lot of times folks will use a website builder and they will build their website. It looks great on their laptop, but then they go to mobile and everything is out of place and it's too big or it's too small or the pictures are off or the button is gigantic. Not taking into account mobile design is a huge mistake. We've got close to 70% of the last time I looked, and it's probably just going up and up, of website traffic internationally, globally, is on a mobile device of some sort, whether that's a tablet or a cell phone. So you think there are a lot of folks, especially in rural Southwest Virginia, who might not have access to a desktop or a laptop at home. They might only have a cell phone as their point of access to internet service. So you really, really need to make sure that your site looks good on mobile. Check it on your phone, have your friend check it on their Android, have your other friend check it on their 10-year-old device. Make sure that, it's kind of consistent and looking well. So some things that work on desktop don't work on mobile. So sometimes you'll have to look at your website builder and whether you can hide things, right? Like sometimes those big menus with extra things on them don't work on mobile. And you want to make sure to kind of take a look at that and see, do a user experience, pretend you're a customer looking at your website. Do you know what it's saying? Does it look good on your cell phone? Can it lead you to do the action that you want your customer to do pretty easily? And so most website builders like Wix and Squarespace have mobile versions where you can toggle back and forth while you're designing it to see how it looks on mobile. And that's really important to pay attention to. Even with that, some folks don't pay attention to it. So I'm telling you, please pay attention to mobile design. And the last thing I'm going to say is poor quality photos. So back to brand voice, like I said, that's the foundation. It's everything. If you have poor quality photos, what does that say about your brand, right? If they're blurry, if they're just not composed well, like if they don't tell a story, it's visual imagery, it's visual storytelling, and so much more photography and even increasingly videography is really important to add credibility, to tell your story. It's the attention grabber, right? We said that first part of the funnel is attention. And so it's really important that you get that right, that you grab folks' attention with the visual imagery, with your brand voice. And so you just can't have authority with poor quality photos. So for small businesses, I always recommend that, if, everyone's going to say, oh, but I know so-and-so that only took photos on their iPhone, right? Yes, some people are very good photographers with just their iPhone, and you can get pretty decent quality photos anymore with an iPhone. However, if photography is not something that you have an eye for, don't use your iPhone. Hire somebody to come in and take pictures and maybe barter. Maybe there's a new photographer in the area who's looking for portfolio work, and you can offer services in exchange for photography to use, or the same with a videographer. Get connected with new businesses, get connected with students who are looking for projects. Get connected if you don't have the budget, but the minute you have the budget, please hire someone for photography. That's the number one thing I run into. Even when a client's ready for me to build a website for them, if they don't have good photography, we get kind of stuck telling their story. All right. Does anyone have any questions?
Sarah, I see a question.
Okay.
Is there a certain resolution or format that photos should have?
Well, it really just depends. So I have that a little bit later down in the slides as free resources. But one of the things to remember with photos is that they need to be the size that they're being presented in. So if you have a very high quality photo, for example, that someone took and it's 4,000 pixels by 6,000 pixels, even a desktop is only 1,200 by 900, right? And that would take up the entire screen of the desktop. So make sure you're sizing it down, first of all, to whatever it is, 500 by 500 or whatever that is. And then there are free tools that you can use to compress your photos so that they're even smaller, so that it helps your website speed, right? Because that is also really important. So we'll go over that one a little bit later, but it just depends. If it's a hero image, which is what we like to call that large image on the top of a website that really tells your story, that one is generally about 1,200 by however wide you want it, 400 or 500 pixels. And so, yeah, you do need to resize. Resizing photos is very important. Now, you'll have website builders like Wix or Squarespace that will automatically kind of resize your photos, but even still, doing it ahead of time really adds a lot of value as far as making sure your website isn't slowed down by really high resolution photos. So I've got just some tips through here, and I'll just go through these quickly, talking about the mistakes. So tips to make your text readable. Consistent fonts. Again, that's your brand voice. We're going back to the colors and the fonts. Only use 2 to 3 max. You have your strongest font, that's like your brand font, your primary brand font. Then you'll have a secondary, that's your text. And then you might have a third that's kind of like for your buttons on your site, or for little quotes or things to grab attention. I like to call that kind of like your decorative font. But really, you should only have 3, right? Because when you get crazy with fonts, it's confusing. It doesn't say anything about your brand, and it doesn't help your brand voice with that consistency. The fonts should be to be readable. Any big text like blog articles or little paragraphs should be at least 14 point to 18 point. I like to stick right in the middle at 16 points, depending on the design of the site. And headlines should be 32 to 48 pixels for the most part. So that's your title, say, where you say like classes or, dresses or whatever you're selling, that kind of heading that you have for that. Answer your users' questions. Again, that was part of the not knowing who you are when someone lands on your website. So using those consistent fonts and colors to stay on brand. Have clear calls to action above the fold. Above the fold means the first thing that folks see without having to scroll, right? So above the fold. And then make sure to include contact information in your footer. There's nothing more frustrating than a customer wanting to engage with you, but then they can't find out how to get to you or how to call you or how to email you. Again, back to the mobile responsiveness, and I mentioned this, that most DIY builders do have an option to edit tablet and mobile versions. So when choosing how to build your website, just do some research before you start building with a website, right? Make sure you're going to have the control over your mobile design. And remember that Google prioritizes mobile responsive designs. And what that means is if your website's not responsive to mobile, if it doesn't change based on the breakpoint or the view port that your user has, then Google's going to put it way far down the line. And so no matter what, you can have all the keywords possible, but if you have a site that's really slow to upload on mobile and isn't responsive in design, Google's going to ding you pretty hard for that. So it's something to keep in mind. Photo quality matters. And so I have an example here, of a client of mine, Dharma Pharmaceuticals out of Bristol. And when they started, they still don't really, because they're moving, they still don't have a great photo bank of professional photos to choose from. So if you don't have that and you don't have an eye for photography, so you could do it yourself, you do have the option of buying and purchasing stock photography. And there are lots of websites you could Google for free stock photography. The important thing is to really read the licensing correctly. Most of the times you can purchase stock photography, or there might be free licenses for stock photography, as long as you credit the photographer somewhere on your website, which can get kind of clunky and ugly with design, right? So a lot of people don't like to do that. Or you can purchase it and then use that license will be applicable for online. Now, you probably won't be able to use it to produce things to sell, right? Like you won't be able to buy a stock photo and then frame it and, sell it in your store, or put it on a mug and sell it in your store. So just keep that in mind. But for website use, to get an idea of who you are, especially at first, before you have the chance to get good photography of your business in action, so to say, then yeah, it's okay to use stock photography. But be careful, because if you're a unique business, for example, I have a client who specializes in yoga for all sorts of types of people. The stock photography is all 20-year-old women who are very thin, but that's not their ideal client. So having that stock photography that's available to us online was not really their clientele and could alienate folks before they even got to them. So just keep in mind your brand voice, what problem you're trying to solve for your clients, and then go on the search for photography that way. A really good thing is that, like Wix, I don't know about Squarespace, honestly, but I know Wix and some of these other web builders do have a pretty substantial stock photography. Canva also does, available to you if you're using that web builder. And so that can be helpful and keep it a little simple. All right, that's the end of that section. Before we move on to search engine optimization, is there any other questions about DIY web building?
I do not see any questions.
Great. Well, I'm going to take a little breath here, because search engine optimization is probably the top question that I get from folks. And it's the thing that's always changing. There's some big changes coming in just next month in May with Google. So like I said, every single one of these sections have full-time professionals doing it as a job, just specializing in each one of these categories. So remember not to get too hung up in being perfect on any of this, right? You do need to make effort in all of these sections, but being an expert is not important, especially if you're a business that's localized and trying to serve local customers, right? So for example, if you're Salt of the Earth Spa, you're not trying to sell Salt of the Earth Spa to people all over the country, not even all over the region, right? So you just really need to rank locally. So like if someone is in Abingdon and they're searching for health spas in Abingdon, then you want to rank for that. And that's fairly simple to do. And so don't get caught up. There are a lot of, especially for search engine optimization, because it is something that people find so confusing and so in depth. People I see being taken advantage of by companies that will say, we, guarantee number one Google rankings in 30 days or whatever. The truth is that search engine optimization is about authority. It's about Google ranks based on how well you're solving problems. So if someone is Googling how, best places to eat in Abingdon, well, that's maybe not a good example, but in whatever problem they're trying to solve, whatever question they want answered, if their question's not answered, even if you're on the front page and they bounce off, you'll soon not rank for that, right? So, but if you are way down the list on search engine optimization and you start answering people's questions, you'll eventually make your way to the top because Google rewards those kinds of things. So our last bit is talking about content is king, and it takes time to build content. It takes time to get people to read your content. So really just stick with it, right? Search engine optimization is, especially for localized searches, is not rocket science. It just takes a little effort. So the first thing is now you have a website, right? How are people going to find you? You don't want to have, it's like the business that's in the alley. How do people get them there? So you need to first is claim your Google My Business listing. Now, Google My Business listing is when you search, say you're searching web designers at Abingdon, you get a little section there that will list 4 or 5 different Google business listings. And then you can click them. Now, if you have not established a Google business listing, you might not show up. You might not show up on the map. You may show up if people have taken pictures and submitted them or submitted reviews to Google, right? That happens to restaurants or hotels a lot. But if you're a business where, people aren't necessarily taking photos of you and putting those online, and either way, you need to claim your Google My Business listing. It's fairly simple. You just go online, find your listing if it's on Google. If it's not on Google, go ahead and add a new one. And there's like a little option to claim your business. Now, the important thing there is to make sure all of your information is correct. It answers the questions people want answered quickly, right? They want to know if you're open. They want to know what your menu is if you're a restaurant. They want to know what services you offer if you're an auto center. It really depends on your business, but you can get in there on Google and really you could do a lot and offer a lot of information. Sometimes that means folks won't come to your website, but if they just come straight to your business, it doesn't matter, right? So Google My Business listing is really important up there, I think, with your website. And once you have your Google My Business listing, Google has, of course, a whole host of other tools for analytics data, right? So from your Google My Business listing, they have trends and sort of data that will show you how many people clicked the phone number to call it from their phone, right? How many people clicked for directions on the Google map. And those are really important things to see so that are people finding what they need to find? Are they taking action? There's also things like Google Search Console, which you attach to your website, and that will show you things like, how are people finding you? And you'd be really surprised sometimes by the search terms that people use to get to you. And once you know those search terms, those are the things that you use to develop your content. Those are the things you use to develop your offerings and fine tune your brand voice, because sometimes it really surprises a business what problems they're solving for their customers that they didn't maybe even realize were problems. And so if you find something that's really popular you didn't know about, then really hone in on that. I'm going to go ahead and take questions in between on this just because I know this is big stuff.
Okay, so the question is, if you have time, could you briefly demonstrate how to find or create the My Business listing?
Wow. I don't know that we have time. Let me see here. Can you all still see my screen here if I share? So let's see here. If we go to Google My Business, right, you can see mine is already showing up of business profiles that I do, but you can also come in here and to google.com/business, and you can set up your business profile. You can set up a website. Google has a website builder. I don't recommend using it, but they try to prompt you to do it all the time. But here you can see this is a Google business listing, right? So this is what shows up when people are searching for things. And if this is your business, you have the title, you'll have reviews from folks, you'll have what it's classified as, you'll have whether it's open or closed, depending on the time the person is searching. And then you have options here for overview. You can add photos on your Google My Business listing, which I find is really important to do and update kind of regularly, because that, again, shows Google that you're relevant, that you're open, that you're active, that you're relevant to folks who are looking for you. But this is just basically where folks can find everything they want to know. Like if they're in Chicago and they're looking for a music shop, and they Google this and Chicago Music Exchange comes up, they could call, they can get directions and map right there. They can message you, they can head to your website. So that's why Google My Business is so important, because it's real time, especially if you're tourism focused, right? People are in town and finding things to do. I just read somewhere that like 86% of tourists are not deciding what they want to do until they get into town. So that's why Google My Business is really important. Now, if you claim your business, Google will walk you through the steps. One of the things they do is they actually mail you a code. So it's on a little postcard. It's a little frustrating because you have to watch for it, but it does take a few days. So it's not an instant thing that you can claim, but it's definitely worth doing.
So, Sarah, the next question is, should everyone set up a Google My Business listing, even nonprofits or service groups?
Yes, absolutely. If you want people to find you by searching, then you need to have a Google My Business listing. So if you, for example, I worked with someone who offered retreats, but she didn't have like a retreat center. She kind of did retreats at places people invited her to, right? She didn't have a Google My Business listing. And that was a mistake because people couldn't find her, right? If someone is trying to look for person to run a retreat, or, however people would search for that, they couldn't find her, or like retreat builders in the Southeast. And so what I had her do was go ahead and set up a Google My Business listing. And then Google does let you, if you don't have a physical address, right? Like my physical address is my house and I don't want to put that. So instead of doing that, you put your service area. And so for her service area was, 100. I think you can set it up by miles. You could set it up by regions, like the Southeast or Texas, Virginia, Tennessee. You can name states. So it's, even if you are servicing a large area and you don't have a physical address, yes, it's important to do a Google My Business listing. All right. Now, keywords, when I mentioned in that first step about Google Search Console, identifying what keywords people are finding you by, also obviously identify what keywords you want people to find you by, and then use them more than seems natural to you. So while you're writing your content, while you're building your website, when you're talking about things like, for example, we'll take Dharma Pharmaceuticals. They needed to use medical cannabis, medical marijuana, cannabis dispensary, Bristol dispensary, Abingdon dispensary. Those are your keywords, right? The things that people will be using to search for you. So it's not enough to just say medical cannabis in Bristol, Virginia one time. It should be on every section, however you can work it in more than once. And so I'm saying to use it frequently. I am not saying to keyword stuff. And now what keyword stuff means is back in the days, people would take really tiny text. You've probably seen it. They'd make it like 1 point and they'd put a bunch of keywords in the footer or some other place on the website that you could hardly see. Google recognizes that and they will penalize you forever. So like, just don't keyword stuff. Don't, just have a paragraph of keywords, but use it in a conversational and readable manner that makes sense and answers, the questions folks are needing answers for, but do use it a lot. Use it a little bit more than you find natural. The next thing is alt tags. So alt tags are basically if I'm visually impaired and I'm looking at a website, or I can't see photos on my browser for whatever reason. An alt tag is what describes what the photo says. So for example, on this slide, the alt tag might say laptop with magnifying glass on top, or, whatever. When you use your alt tags, when you describe those, right? Because Google can't read a photo. Google can read the alt tag though. So describing what's in your photos. So say you're that outdoor company, you want to say you've got a picture of someone riding a bike on the creeper trail because you rent bikes to folks on the creeper trail. Well, in your alt tag, you should say bike rentals on the creeper trail in Abingdon, Virginia. And that's a good alt tag that will show search engine optimization, or show search engines rather, what that photo says. So especially if you're a very highly visual website without a lot of text, alt tags is where your text lives. So that gets a little tricky when you're brand new to this, but like, for example, with Wix as a web builder, they have a section where, like, after you upload your photo, if you select that photo, there is a selection for alt tags. So once you know that, once you find that, alt tag every photo you ever put on your website. It's really important. Okay. Now the last one I had was to do an audit every few months to see how you're ranking, right? Like I said, nothing ever stays static on search engine optimization. You need to refresh your website. You need to add new content. You need to answer new questions. You do need to be fairly frequent. I would say at least once a month is sort of minimum. Some businesses will need to do it a lot more than that, depending on what kind of business you have. But even if you're a nonprofit who is staying the same, you have new things to share. You either have a new grant that you want to talk about, or you have a new event that you want to talk about. And those are appropriate to have to refresh on events pages or to refresh in a blog. Even if you're like the example of physical therapy office, right? You're doing kind of the same thing all the time. Well, you can have a blog that shares how to get physical therapy services, or a certain kind of physical therapy technique folks can do at home, things that people will find value in and they'll keep coming back to your website over and over again. Really helps your search engine optimization. So kind of take a look every couple of months at your website and really see, like, oh, well, people have never visited that page, right? We're going back to the Google Analytics tools. People never went to that page. Why? And maybe it doesn't answer their questions, or maybe there's not a link to it from the homepage. Sometimes we totally miss things like that. Sometimes there's a broken link. So just like take a really analytical eye to your website every so often to make sure there's nothing that you're missing and that people are finding you. All right. So any questions about search engine optimization before we move on? I think we're hitting our end here.
No, he just, James Walsh just says, thanks for the reminder. I'm a biker and I'd like to do that sometime.
Okay. All right. So lastly, we've gone through brand voice, right? We've got strategy. You've built your website. You've done a good job of avoiding the mistakes. You've gone back and looked at your keywords and tried to get, on Google My Business, and you've got people coming to your website. Now we get to social media, right? Now's the time where you are promoting and you're trying to get people to your website to do something. And so it's really important that you go back to your brand voice, right? One of the questions we can ask ourselves is, if your brand had a personality, where would it hang out? And we're not talking about just like it would hang out at the local coffee shop, or it would hang out, at the Barter Theater or in boardrooms or wherever your brand personality would hang out. But also, where does it live online? Does it live on, is LinkedIn more, appropriate? Is it YouTube? Is it Twitter? Is it Facebook? Is it Instagram? I mean, I think we can all pretty much agree it's always Facebook and Instagram. But what's the second or third place that you need to be, right? What makes most sense for your brand personality? Do not try to be everywhere. Do not try to make content that will fit every platform, because it's not necessary. It will burn you out and you will do a poor job of it. And inconsistency on social media is worse than not even being there, because people won't trust you, right? You'll lose credibility. If they take a look at your Facebook page and see that it was only updated, 2 years ago, and they might not come back. But Facebook is really important for reviews. A lot of people do use Facebook reviews similarly to Google reviews, and sometimes they show up. Eventually Google will match the Facebook page, and they'll pull in those Facebook reviews. So a Facebook page is really important. Facebook and Instagram are owned by the same folks. You can use, just make a square image. If you're going to use a square image, it shows up on Facebook great, and it shows up on Instagram great. And you can cross post those things. You can schedule them in advance. It's really, really important to make your life as easy as possible. I sit down, and not for my own business, because it's like the cobblers without shoes, but for my clients, and I will batch. I've got a strategy. I know what we're going after for the month, and I will batch create all of the content for the month. Take it, several 3 or 4 hours or whatever. And then I'll schedule it. And then I don't have to worry about it for the rest of the month unless we have timely things. So consider doing that. It's really important. And that's why I say scale appropriate to your capacity. It doesn't matter how much you'll Google, and people will say you should be posting to Instagram twice a day. Good content is so much better than lots of unappealing content. So make sure you have a strategy, make sure you're using your brand voice, and then strategically post. I do recommend at least 3 times a week for a business, but some businesses don't need to do more than 3 times a week. Do not stress yourself out by thinking you have to do it 2 or 3 times a day. So here are different places for content. Now, a lot of folks will say, I don't know, just what is the word saying? Bad news is still news, right? Bad press is still good press, because it brings attention to you. I don't think so, especially for small businesses locally. But yeah, think of the motto, create less, promote more. So you want to say you're creating a special. You've got a special for the month. How many times can you share that special, and how long can it live? A special is actually not evergreen content. So let's focus on something that's evergreen content. You're an outdoor shop. You always rent bicycles to people for the Creeper Trail. So evergreen content would be things like tips for packing your backpack for a Creeper Trail ride, right? And that's something that could be shared over and over and over again for years to come. It could answer people's questions who are brand new to the trail, who have come before, over and over and over again. So that's what we call evergreen content. So the stuff that will stay relevant for a long time and works for repurposing. Flash sales and events should be shared. And like I said, you can repurpose that content also, but it's really important to focus first on that evergreen content, answering questions, solving problems. So to blog or not to blog. A blog, I think, I mentioned it before, it's really important. It can really help search engine optimization. But if you don't have the capacity to blog, don't blog. If you can't, tap an employee to do it, or if you can't do it yourself at least twice a month, just don't do it, because someone will go to your blog and they'll find you haven't done it for a year, and so they don't take you seriously. So really try to be strategic as you add these things to how you're marketing. An e-newsletter is really important. I said here, if you had to choose between social media and an e-newsletter, like where you were putting your eggs in, I would say choose the e-newsletter. And the reason is, again, back to that, do you own your content, right? You don't own your followers on Facebook. Facebook could have a glitch, or Instagram could have a glitch tomorrow and delete all your followers. An e-newsletter is a way to keep your already engaged customers, right? If they sign up for your e-newsletter, they're already engaged with you. They already have shown interest in what you have to offer. It's a way to just really directly touch them. So e-newsletters are really important. Social media. So if you write evergreen content, you posted it on your blog, you've shared it on your e-newsletter with your interested customers, then you post it to social media to get people over to your blog. Those are all really important things. It's kind of a whole step-by-step process of taking one piece of content and then chopping it up and sharing it in lots of different places. So that way you don't have to duplicate your efforts so much. You don't have to come up with brand new things for each platform. use the one core component of your content, use it several places. And the last thing I'll say is user generated content is great. When you don't have the energy for a blog, there are some places, I follow this glamping place in North Carolina. They 100% only use user generated content. So people go glamping at this place. They know their photos are going to be shared. It's their brand voice, that it's always a user experience. So find that user generated content. If someone took a picture of your services, or they took a picture near you, or whatever it may be, share that content on your page. People love it. It establishes community. They get to be a little bit of an influencer, by proxy. And it helps when you need more content, but you don't have the time to create it. So we're at the end here. I have a free resource page for you guys. I use canva.com. It's a design application. If you ever wonder how people get cute little graphics with photos and text and, whatever for the Instagram, that's a place to go. It's free. You can get a pro account for a little more, but the free version is pretty good for most people. Facebook Business Suite, I mentioned that earlier. It allows you to schedule your posts, and it also monitors your statistics, and you could cross post to both. tinypng.com is the compression service I mentioned for photos, to make sure you have the right size photos for optimal website speeds. And then MailChimp I find it the easiest to use. It is not easy to use, but I find it the easiest to learn, rather, for folks who want a free e-newsletter service. All right, I'm ready for any questions. That's my contact information if any of you need to follow up with anything. And thank you so much for listening to me today.
Sarah, Ernie Berganza says, thanks. This is great and really helpful. And I happen to agree. You've done a great job, and we are lucky to have folks like you who are willing to participate in this new knowledge training class. And folks, take a screenshot maybe of Sarah's contact information, because she is a great resource. James Waltz says, thanks for the presentation.
You're very welcome. Thanks, everyone.
Sandy?
Yes. Sarah, can you? Yes, thank you. I just wanted to know, first of all, thanks, Sarah. As Kathy said, we could not do this program without professionals like yourself that donate your time and your expertise to share with others. We are a community, and we're here to support each other. So thank you for your time. Just wanted to put a plug in for our next new knowledge, which will be on May the 5th. That will focus on QuickBooks basics. And we are looking forward to that presentation, and I hope that you will make plans to join us. We have only 3 sessions left through June, and it's hard to believe. We had, I think, 21 or 22 sessions that we started out in 2020 and through 21. So I hope you're finding value. If you are, share this information with others that they can take advantage of it. I will share Sarah's slides with you, and once I upload it to YouTube, I will share the video, so that if you miss something, you want to go back and check, or if you want to share with someone else, feel free. So thanks again. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. You may get blown away by the wind, but stay safe and enjoy life. Thank you, and have a great day.